Top of the morning to you laddies. Oh really? That's taken. Alright. Hey guys, Ted here. Welcome to Teddy Games. So today we're making a game similar to Color Switch, but kind of different. So grab your friends, we're gonna need a goat and someone to do this. This game, like a few of the other games, was a little bit of a rush, took me under an hour to create, and you're going to see why on how simple it is, and also how I did not add music to this one, but there should be music upon the release of this video, we shall see. So right now, take a quick look at the game, see what you're getting into. If you like it, then continue watching. If you don't like it, then I'll see you in another video perhaps. So there are a few components that go into this, very, very simple. One, of course, is movement. Two, of course, is the rotation of the rings, and of course, the spawning of the rings. Similar to the Endless Runner, it uses a very similar system. In this game, I wanted to make something, again, that's simple and again would take somebody under an hour, something basic for you guys to actually get yourself dug into, something very catch-uppy, something very simple and publishable in a way. So the only two programs I use for this game is Photoshop and of course Unity. There are 4 major scripts inside the actual game. Everything else is just can be thrown away and tossed out. I do create games in a very specific way. The way I like to create things is to make a sprite, and it usually starts off with something very simple, circles, rings, etc. and you get a game very, very similar to what you see on your screen. For this one I just made a tiny little circle, thought what can we actually do with this circle, and then of course you're thinking other things like Color Switch, which has awesome trails, awesome lighting, all this type of stuff, but of course we only have a very short amount of time to do this. Well, the game could be entirely based on timing, a skill that not a lot of people have, and you'll be surprised how often it takes somebody like me who's played it several times just to test. It takes me very, very long to actually get any form of decent score. It's one of those ones where the human mind plays great tricks on you and it doesn't allow you to actually progress further just because of human error. So if you are wondering why I made everything in Photoshop, it is purely because we want these nice crisp edges to things like loops and rings and stuff like that. And I started with hexels for this one, but realized when I got the idea, it's not going to play out very well. It just looked a little bit too pixelated for a game where rotation is involved. Whenever you have something like rotation, pixelated games don't usually work. Pixelated sprites work with left to right movement, up to down movement, but of course when you're rotating it, you're going to notice that it's not actually pixelated looking. It kind of decides to anti-alias those corners and edges, and it looks really, really weird, but hey, it's up to you. So of course we have one script for our main character. We've called this movement because that's basically all it controls. It also controls the depth of the character as well if it hits the side of any of the rings. We've got a manager script on there which basically controls the spawn rate of things and how it actually functions, how the game functions and how the level kind of progresses. And then of course we have another one called loop, which basically just controls the loop, and that's a very, very simple script of just turning the loop around in rotation. And I'll teach you how to do all of these very, very shortly, but right now we're going to take a look at something else very important, which is our assets inside the actual game. The first thing is our player. Our player actually needs 3 components. It needs the movement script attached to it. It already has a sprite renderer, so we're not going to count that. It also needs a collider of some sort and a rigid body 2D. Upon the rigid body 2D, you want to change it to kinematic because we are going to be controlling it without forces and without actual physics. We're basically going to be lerping it from position to position because we want very accurate movement. The collider, for this I used a circle collider because in a circle collider it basically fills in the entire shape, so we can get a nice clean circle collider that actually covers the entire image. Then of course by default you actually have the tag for player, so we want to change our tag to player for our actual player, and then of course for other things we want to create different tags, for example loops for the actual loops. The reason why we want to do this is because tags are going to be used in the scripts to actually find out which items are which, where items are where. Then of course we want to create a loop game object. We're going to chuck this in our hierarchy when it's done, but for now we need to know what components actually go onto a loop. Very simple, we want the loop script, which is going to handle the rotation of our actual loops, and of course we want a collider of some sorts, but for this I used a polygon collider because I didn't want to edit it myself. The polygon collider is very, very useful because you can actually just apply it to a game object and it will automatically sort if it is a PNG image or an image with transparency. It's automatically going to create collisions around the pixels that are not alpha, meaning everything transparent is not going to be a part of the collider. The final script is of course a tracker script, and I've talked to you guys about this far too often, so I'm just going to skip. Right guys, sorry to butt in here, but it's time to thank our patrons and stuff like that. So thank you very much to all the patrons who are here. Bang, bang, bang. I talk to you guys all the time. You guys know who you are. You guys are really starting it off so that we can get quite a few patrons on there so we can actually move into a decent location, decent area and stuff like that. And I can work on these a lot more. If I have more days to work on it, we can make more complex games and not stuff that necessarily takes under an hour all the time. I really want want to hire other people to come and show you the stuff that I'm not good at. For example, programming I think I can do fairly easily. Unity I can work my way around it, but when it comes to stuff like artwork, it's not very me. Sound, I can do sound. I like doing sound. Sounds fun. Music's fun. But artwork and UI and all that visual stuff I'm just really not good at, so I'd love to get somebody in who can do that, and of course teach you guys in these videos and stuff like that, so we can just switch between the two, when of course we're talking about the two, so you guys get a much clearer understanding of both fields. So if you would like to support that, the link for that should be in the description below for Patreon, of course, and thank you guys. Continue watching your video, won't interrupt anymore, promise. So the movement script for this is incredibly easy. Basically, the only thing you really want to do is get, of course, a touch position, and then of course create a target in front of you, then lerp towards that target. So the magic number for this game is actually 2. We move 2 meters ahead. We of course spawn the next ring 2 meters ahead of our current player, so we know that that's the magic number of where we're going to lerp to, where our target's going to eventually be. So I have a function move which is called every time you put your mouse down, or every single time you tap your screen, and that basically goes like this. First of all, we want to create a temporary target. We call it temp target, and we set it equal to our current target, which of course is 0, 0, which is of course the spawning position of our actual player. We also want to take our temporary target variable and we want to add 2 onto the Y position. So we basically go temp target.y plus equals 2, because we want to send our target to our temporary position. It seems like a little bit of a waste of time, but using these variables is actually very, very useful. You have your target set to 0, 0, then we're going to of course create a temporary duplicate of that target, so we have it here. We're going to move it up 2, and then we're going to say, hey target, you want to be like temporary target? Go up there. This basically gives us a little bit more freedom to actually use that temporary target to do silly little things, and if it's not right, then of course we can set it back to the original target's position, keeping the original target in case something is wrong. It's completely up to you guys how you decide to use it. You could go target.y plus 2, and then you're good. Same thing. Then of course we spawn a loop by finding our manager function, but we don't actually have the manager function just yet. In our update function, we go this.transform.position is equal to vector2.lerp. We give our current position, we give our target position, which we have called target, which is that target. So if this target moves, we are actually going to lerp towards that position. And the target is moving, of course, at 2 meters, which means we are always going to be moving at 2 meters along the thing, or 2 units, or whatever Unity uses inside their thing. Please clarify this. And finally, we want to add a speed, but that speed component is, of course, a public float, which we can edit inside the inspector, so we get a speed that we really like. Then, of course, we do an on collision enter 2D, and then, of course, we create a collision, which we are going to call OBJ, which basically gets back the collider that we are actually hitting. We then check whether or not what we have hit is actually a loop by checking if our obj.transform.tag is equal to loop. If it is, we are going to instantiate a death particle, which I made prior to this. It's very, very simple, like any other particle system. Basically, I just added little triangles of a circle. Again, I say this over and over again. If you want to do a simple death of just destroying a game object, the best way to do it is to instantiate a particle system straight afterwards, so it doesn't look like they just got disappeared. Right, that's basically it for the movement. Then of course we want the loop script, and the loop script looks a little bit like this. Transform.rotate, we of course want to get the vector3.forward, which is basically a position that shoots straight through the screen. So if you want to grab a pin and poke it through your screen, that is the axis that it's actually going to start rotating as. Then of course we want to times that by speed, and of course time.delta time, so our speed can be like 100 or 50 or 1000, and it won't look too ridiculous, but going in 0.1s and 0.01s. We want to try and find a game object, of course, player, and if we are less than 7 from its Y position, then we're going to destroy ourselves. And I determined that 7 was actually the perfect position where it's out of frame, so it's destroying itself without being seen. This way we only have about 5 game objects on screen at once, so we are not constantly spawning stuff and not getting rid of it. We need to get rid of it as well because it's just going to take up some memory, and we do not want that. Moving right on to the manager function. The manager function basically has 2 things that you guys should really be interested in. The first one is of course the spawning of an actual loop. Every time it spawns a loop, it takes the last position that it spawned a loop and of course adds 2. Remember, 2, the magic number. Then of course we want to instantiate it. Fairly simple, right? Well, we do also need to link the fact that these hoops need to line up at some point, or else it's impossible to actually get through them. There are many ways you can go about this, but I actually ended up doing a very, very simple method which matches the previous loop's rotation with the next loop's rotation. So under the rotation part of the instantiation, I've decided to put a last loop.transform.rotation, basically keeping them in the loop. Of course, we can take a score variable. For this, I just went int score. Very, very simple. Starts at 0, works its way up. Then, of course, within the script, you put score plus plus, which basically pluses 1 onto the int. Very simple. We got movement, we got our collisions, we got death when we want it to. Everything is done. It's so very, very simple. And then, of course, there's just a little bit of polish and refinement for something like UI. The UI portion of this game was incredibly easy. I just made a few game objects with a few UI components on it. When, of course, I wanted the death screen to pop up, I just went death screen.setActive is equal to true. Then, of course, when I want other things to disappear, I just set it to false. And it's very, very simple from there on out. Now all you need to do is polish and refine the entire thing. Not much to it, very simple game, very simple concept, but extremely fun to try and get past 3. Because that's as far as I can get. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and of course our Discord channel full of developers out there if you want to join the Gold Squad private Discord channel where I talk more frequently because I can't handle 4,000 members over 5 members. And of course you can support us on Patreon to get onto this channel. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully your projects are going swimmingly and I'll see you next week.